everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of Micadelic. I'm Mike Brancatelli. Thanks for being here. We got a great episode for you today. We got Hallie Rose on the show. Hallie is CEO of Lunar Wild and the host of the Thought Room podcast. Hallie just spent about 4 months down in Costa Rica at Soltara Ayahuasca Center, where I know some wonderful people living and working there, some healers and some other people. And Hallie and I connected on Instagram. I was doing an Instagram live. I was supposed to do an Instagram live with someone, and they didn't get the time right, and so I was just like doing a random one, and I saw that she had joined the chat, and I was like, oh, Thought Room podcast. I was like, oh, come on here and join in the convo. We chatted for a little bit, and then just decided to do a podcast. So here it is. We just recorded our conversation for all of you to hear, and it was a great one. I really enjoyed it. So I realized, as I was doing this intro, I was like, I started talking about some things that were going on, and I'm like, oh man, like I'm really getting into some stuff here, because I looked up and it was like 26 minutes in, and I'm like, I can't do a 26-minute intro. So I decided to record a solo podcast, and that's about an hour long. So that's releasing, but this as well. So whatever I was talking about, I remember early on in my podcasting career, like I remember looking at like Duncan and Chris Ryan and being like, oh, they have long intros. Like I did like a 23-minute intro in front of a podcast that I did with John Perkins, who wrote the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Like, what were you thinking, dude? Like, what are you doing? Well, they do it, so I could do it. But anyway, yeah, everything that I wanted to like say in that intro was recorded for a solo podcast. So go check that out as well. I'm talking about going back to people, the surreal, weird feeling right now, the desire for things to go back to normal, the desire to sort of ignore what's happening and dive into business as usual, and what that means, and also a little bit of the cost of all of this, the cost of isolation, the cost of quarantine. We're already living in a very isolated and separated society, in a world, civilization built on separation and loneliness and depression and suicides. And we're going to talk about this also tonight in Isolation Tank, which is the new series hosted by myself, Jennifer Sodini, with a bunch of incredibly wonderful human beings that I'm so happy to know and feel so familiar with, even though just getting to know all of them, Hallie being one of those. So Hallie is my team member, my crew member in the Isolation Tank. We also have past podcast guests, the brilliant Trisha Eastman, Sophia Rockland, Michael Phillip, Jennifer Sodini, as I mentioned, and then some new people that I'm just starting to meet, Jeremy Johnson and Matt from Time Wheel, and Richie and Jim and Colin and so many wonderful human beings that I'm just so happy to have this group mind jam, mind meld, thing going on with these wonderful folks, and everybody brings something really unique and creative and interesting to the equation. Oh, Michael Garfield, I forgot to mention him. Big shout out to him because he was on the show as well, and we're gonna get into that. Pay attention to that. And that's really it. I mean, if you can support this show, it would mean a lot to me. Just do it in whatever way that you can. I suppose that like if you really want to help, that you can find a way to do that. There's links in the podcast thing. I know it's like a tough time right now for everybody. Including me. But I love doing this. This is my passion. I don't really do anything else. And so, I do, but I don't really want to. But yeah, whatever you can do. Like, I always say too, it's like the best thing to do is also just like telling people about it. Hey, there's this show, Micadelic, with this crazy guy who talks about crazy things. Check it out. So just, yeah, do what you can. I appreciate the love and the care and the time and the attention that you take. Whatever you do, it's awesome. All right, well, without further ado, let's hop into this conversation. I don't see anything else. It's so weird having a short intro, but I think maybe this is what I'm going to do. If I notice myself going over like 10, 12 minutes in the intro, I'm just going to make that a solo cast, and I'll put it out at the same time that I put out like I'm doing right now. Tell me what you guys think. Let me know. Reach out to me. Mikeadelic_podcast on Instagram. Mike Brancatelli on Facebook. Mikeadelic on Facebook. Mike Brank is my website, BRANC. Message me. Let me know. Communicate with me. Chat with me. Rap with me. Talk with me. Tell me, I encourage all kinds of feedback. Don't be shy. Reach out. I love hearing from you. How else are we going to build deep connection and deep community without truth, honesty, transparency, and connection? I'm you and you're me. Let's make it happen. All right. Without further ado, let's get in this awesome conversation with my new Isolation Tank crew member and friend, the great, wonderful, and wise Hallie Rose.
Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong.
We don't need new laws that control our consciousness and rigidly place it in a prison.
Cognitive liberty. The fact that as adults, if we're not hurting anybody else, we should have the right to explore the contours of our own consciousness without any mediation or legislation on the part of somebody else.
Reject authority. Authority is a lie.
Or is it perception?
Information is power, but we have to seize the opportunity. The opportunity.
Yeah, you spent time living in Costa Rica recently, right? Like you spent about 4 months in Costa Rica?
Yeah, I was living at Soltara Healing Center.
That'll change your perspective for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it nothing short of completely changed my life, for sure. Working with ayahuasca in general over the past year has created, I don't want to say it's created, it's revealed a whole new being to me.
What is that whole new being?
That, my friend, is a very broad question, I suppose. I mean, I wouldn't really know where to begin with all the facets of my life that have truly changed as a result of working with this medicine. It's melted into every corner of my life, truly. Yeah.
And was that your first time drinking ayahuasca?
My first time drinking ayahuasca was in May of 2019. I went to Soltara as a guest, and I did a 1-week retreat. So I had 4 medicine ceremonies and pretty limited psychedelic experience going into that compared to some. I don't know, whatever that means, limited, but and then I returned back to the US, and actually part of that experience with drinking the medicine for the first time was that one of the things that came through for me in 2 of my ceremonies was this idea of starting a podcast. Now, when we talk about the voice that talks to you when you're on psychedelics, some people think it's angels, some people think it's God, some people think it's their spirit guides or ayahuasca, or some people just think it's their higher self, and maybe we just have access to the truth of who we are a little bit more cleanly in that space. So I don't know who it was exactly that was this voice that was kind of jarringly just like inserting itself and very firmly telling me I needed to start a podcast. It was not something I considered like a central hobby of mine or really something that I had ever been lit up to do necessarily. But then when I heard it, something touched me so deeply. It was just like a Tetris piece clicked. And I was like, oh, wow, I see how the threads of all the gifts that I've been cultivating over the course of my lifetime culminate to really make sense in this space. So when I got home from Soltara, I started dreaming up what this podcast would be. What was I good at? What could I talk about? What was I passionate about? How, above all, could I just put my ego kind of in a corner and just show up to serve? Like, what did that even look like? So there were all these questions. And of course, with all the questions and creating something new, there arises all of these doubts and that inner critic saying like, who do you think you are to create this? And who wants to listen to you? And all of these things that were really just coming up as shadows for me, trying to keep me small. And eventually I was flipping through my integration notes from Soltara. And I had this one deeply profound journey wherein I think this was probably one of my most profound moments of awakening to date. And I think about Eckhart Tolle's stories and kind of his awakening happening all in one moment, and this idea of splitting into two selves where suddenly there's the mind and then there's the higher self, whereas before awakening they were just one, and you couldn't actually become outside of the mind to just observe the situation. You were just kind of in the feeling. So for me, that moment occurred in ceremony where I was in this, I've told this story before on my podcast, but I was in this dark, infinite void, just this emptiness that extended into forever. And like a little droplet that fell down from the heavens, I had a thought, and the thought just kind of blip appeared in this dark, infinite space as a droplet of color. And I watched it sort of melt around me like somebody was melting Crayola or Dr. Seuss whimsical, and things were spiraling out in all directions. And I was just looking around going, wow, this is beautiful. I'm inside of this experience. I'm inside of this thought. Wow, how lucky I am, how grateful I am for this medicine. What a neat, and I was very much in the present moment of just experiencing what was coming up. But then all of a sudden I had the thought that was like, oh wow, I wish I had someone to share this with. And then that sent me into a different space because I thought, oh, I'm so lonely. And then the moment I had that sort of weighted thought, the room that I was in, this colorful kaleidoscope room, went and it got super contracted and it got very black and white, and I felt suffocated by my own thought, and I felt the heaviness of it in such a real way and it was so immediate that it astonished me. So suddenly I had this awareness that it sounds simple to say now, but my thoughts were very much creating my reality, and my thoughts were very much creating the feelings and the physical embodiments that I was experiencing. So in order to have a life full of energy and vitality and freedom, I needed to create thoughts that were in alignment with that. And to do that, I was going to need to discipline my mind. So for me, that was a major turning point, and I had written into my integration notes, use the thought rooms, use the thought rooms. So it was this idea of creating a thought based on the feeling that I wanted to feel. And as you know, the thought room has now become the name of my podcast.
Yeah, amazing. Wow. I feel like I've been to that place too. Yeah, and you described it perfectly, that Dr. Seuss kind of color melting. Yeah. And it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people that are pursuing, just a life of learning and expanding and growing can sort of intellectually understand. Yeah, thoughts become things, or thoughts create reality. Okay, yeah, I kind of get it on an intellectual level. But I think the real benefit of drinking a medicine like ayahuasca, or any psychedelic for that matter, that can produce a profound effect like that, is the total kind of, somatic experience, like the embodiment of it, and the emotional intelligence that comes with that, like that felt sense of just knowing, seeing, feeling.
Yeah, that felt sense. I mean, there's so many ways that we can cultivate it. And once you get, it's one of those things, once you get it, you get it. And before you get it, you just don't. And I remember before I had really begun my psychedelic journey, one of the first times I experienced that was through this breath work that I did at home, through like a YouTube video that someone had sent me. It was called the Ananda Mandala meditation, and it just has you breathe on like this specific 1-2 count. And it's like 20 or 30 minutes long. And I just remember like buzzing, like electric shooting through my fingers. My hands were cramped up. And I was just like, this is from breath work. Like, well, I didn't know this was possible. And it was like some kind of endogenous release of DMT or something. I don't know. But this experience was just through the roof. And then that got me interested in Tantra. And I'm not an expert on, and when I'm talking about Tantra, I'm talking about, because there are many Tantras, as in yogic teachings, but I'm talking about what people are specifically talking about in the West. When we talk about Tantra, we're usually talking about tantric sexuality and energy. And I got interested in how I could manipulate my own energy through the breath, through visualization. Could I heighten my own pleasure through simply those things? And so I started training in that kind of before, and like self-training. There's just a great book called Urban Tantra that I was reading, and doing some of the breathwork exercises and really playing with, wow, I can make myself feel a certain way. And so yeah, that's been a really neat part of my journey, is understanding energy and how to alchemize it.
Yeah. It's such an important thing. It's such a, like, we all have it, the power of the breath. Like, I mean, most people, I feel grateful to have the power of the breath, right? It's so easily accessible to us. And then learning that, like I was talking about this last night actually with some people, and I brought up this Nikola Tesla quote that I like, where he says, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. It's like,
I just heard that quote somewhere. I don't know where, but that's a beautiful quote.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and we can see, a lot of problems that arise in our lives and in the lives of the collective come from not being able to manage the frequencies and the energies that are just shooting out of us and that are shooting into us, and it's just this crazy chaotic feedback loop that with some practice we can get a hold on,
Yeah, so I mean, how do you think people who maybe are listening, who want to practice that, cultivating more of an awareness of their energetics, what would you recommend?
Definitely psychedelics help, I mean, I think that they're a great, psychedelics. I like psychedelics so much because they're so undeniable. when you're in like a powerful psychedelic experience, it's pretty much undeniable and inescapable, you know. And if you run from it, if you deny it, it just creates more problems for you. It kind of brings everything, you know, what's that Carl Jung quote where he says, like, if we want to if we don't make the unconscious conscious, then it'll dictate our destiny. So if you run from it, like, it's just going to create more problems. So you kind of have to surrender. And there's a sort of like what I would say is like surrender to the natural ebb and flow of nature. Like we aren't separate from nature. We are nature. But because we're one of the only beings on the planet that actually has choice and also has knowledge of our own mortality, it's a real tricky predicament that we find ourselves in. So we try and like be really clever and dominate and control and contain the energy of nature and the chaotic destruction of nature and the, you know, but just like a psychedelic experience, it creates more problems. So I would say create silence, go into nature, try psychedelics, take deep breaths, listen. Yeah. Be open.
That's a good one.
Surrender.
Yeah.
Surrender.
Sure.
I think surrendering also is is a very feminine thing too. Like the masculine is like the trying to dominate and control. And I think that's why we see a lot of the craziness in our world. You know, it's interesting. I mean, it's just, I think that if more people can learn the art of surrendering, then there'll be a lot more peace.
Preach.
Yeah.
Totally. So, yeah. I mean, I love what you're saying. And I love this idea of the undeniable effect of psychedelics in kind of placing you in that realm of surrender. And you were asking me before about, you know, how has plant medicine changed my life? That is one of the most rapturous ways in which plant medicine has changed my life, is choosing to surrender. And whenever I become aware that I'm resisting something, which is not always, but when I become aware, I feel I have a responsibility to open into it. And like, for example, I just recently went through a breakup and it's been super challenging for a variety of ways, because as relationships do, they bring up all of your core woundings and your shadows, and they dance together. And I think that in the ending of our relationship, which I would say was primarily my decision, I felt perhaps a little righteous in that decision. And I think I spiritually bypassed some of the anger and sadness that I was having over it, simply because I've experienced so much loss in my life that I just went, you've got this. You've had things that were way more traumatic than this, which is true. I definitely have. But that doesn't negate the pain that may be there. So the other day, this was like 2 nights ago in meditation, I was sitting there and my heart has kind of felt blocked for maybe a week or a couple weeks, just in general. And I'm not finding it as easy to access my compassion or wanting to give my time to others like normal. And it's really agitating me. Like, it doesn't feel like me, and I just want it to go away. And of course, when we want something to go away, we just end up pushing harder and not really being with what's there. But I went into meditation and I was just asking, okay, how do I open my heart? I desire to open my heart. And what I saw was this movie montage of thoughts. At first I wasn't aware because they just popped up, and they were thoughts about my ex-lover, and they were not kind thoughts. They were like, yeah, he's starting that new project. He'll see it's not gonna take off, or of course he's starting it now, just after after we end, and I've been encouraging to do him, like all of these things were coming up, and it was like,
relate,
I secretly found out that I wanted him to be unsuccessful so that I could feel righteous and better. And I was like, yo, dude. So the moment I noticed that, I actually felt this great sense of relief, because I was like, oh, I see what's going on here. Very nice trick, Hallie. And then I just redirected that energy and I said, okay, what's really going on here? And it was just all this love that had no place to go, and all of this grief that had no place to go, and thinking about the very sudden, jarring ending to the relationship that was not anticipated. I needed to do something with it. So I just sat with it and I just kept repeating, I desire peace. I desire peace. And I actually envisioned he and I in my mind space sitting across from each other with our hands on each other's hearts, just exchanging love energy and healing energy. And after that, I felt so much lighter, and I actually reached out to him and I said, hey, I know this is out of nowhere. I know we haven't really spoken, and I understand this message may not be well received, but if you have space for it, I would love to talk to you, and know that I have no expectation of the conversation other than to hear and understand your hurt, if there was any, because I feel I didn't give you the chance to express what your hurt was, and that I desire peace. And if at any point in the conversation you feel uncomfortable or you feel that you need to leave, know that there would be no judgment on my end for that. And we ended up having like a 4-hour, just beautiful healing conversation on the phone, and understood that I felt some sense of betrayal. And what I know now, after a lot of self-work, is that whatever we experience, we were probably doing to another. And whatever we're blaming somebody else for, we were probably doing. So I said, I'm experiencing these feelings of betrayal. I'm wondering if there were ways in which you felt betrayed by me. So we got to kind of go down this beautiful rabbit hole together and just very calmly discuss our feelings. And Pachamama, plant medicine, seriously, ayahuasca, mushrooms, that has been my training to be able to communicate like that. It's taken a very, very long time, because part of the ego just wants to be right, and you want that person to fight for you and apologize and grovel over you and say they were wrong, and so you can feel good. And I was like, but that doesn't help me grow. Like, what's going to help me be a better person? So
yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Yeah, and it's you really kind of you really do help yourself when you're able to kind of surrender into that experience. And the ego is useful in certain areas, but in certain areas it's I guess really what it is it's trying to protect us and keep us safe. But really that is a comfortable place that can be limiting, Mm-hmm. So when it's like, it's so strange, but a lot of the things that I've experienced and that I've read that have confirmed have all led me to believe that when there's this like uncomfortable, energy, or this kind of jealous or cynical, resentful kind of, it's like, it's a message that you could choose to lean into like you did. And on the other side of that is something unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is that? You probably know it. That Terrence McKenna quote about the feather bed. Do you know that one?
Oh yeah. It's jumping out of an airplane with no parachute on to feel like to realize that you land in a feather bed. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just kind of that's to me what surrender is. It's
Right.
like, I don't know how this looks on the other side, but I know it feels better to jump out of this plane and be free than be trapped in something that's going down, you know?
Yeah, and I think you reorganize your like karmic energy or whatever when you choose to walk that path. When
Totally.
when you choose like the sort of like the narrative of our mainstream kind of culture of like, well, he did this, so screw him, and I'm going to get mine, and you know, this kind of winner take all, zero sum mentality. That all that does is just add more fuel to the fire, and then you wind up in this game of stacking on top and on top and on top, you know, and I've been there, you know, and there's no way out. It's just like you just have to keep going until oblivion.
Totally.
This other way, you destroy your ego first, you get rid of it, and then you move it out of the way, and then you walk past, you sneak past the guards, and then you're able to kind of communicate what you need to communicate, and you grow and you open.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's really about just like almost lying down and showing your belly first. That kind of makes you the strongest, you know? And it invites other people to do the same.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's really important, I think. And maybe that is why you have been called to create a podcast, because there's a particular, you know, voice that you have that is like a particular shade of color that has never existed before in that black abyss of infinity that you experienced, that is particular to you and nobody else. And that your signal, your frequency is going to resonate with people, and they're going to be able to do things that they never thought that they were going to be able to do.
Mm.
I firmly believe that.
I love that.
Yeah, I
Thanks,
firmly
Mike.
believe that. You're welcome. Yeah.
Thanks for the pep talk. I accept.
Yeah. Well, I do think that, I mean, that is what I learned through my podcast, is people telling me, you know, before like Brene Brown and vulnerability became cool or whatever, you know, like I just started opening up because I needed a therapist, and I just started podcasting.
You were first is what you're saying.
What?
You're better than Brene.
Oh, no. I mean, like before I knew anything about it, like before it became like something that people talked about, like I didn't know anything. I just, I'm better than Brene. I've authored 0 books.
Can we make that into a bumper sticker? #, better than Brene.
Yeah. Better than Brene. Before Brene and better. I'm the hipster Brene Brown. No, but what I mean is that like I just was opening up and talking about things that I never thought in a million years I would, and the responses that I was getting back from people were amazing. And that was like, and that mattered more to me than anything else. That people were saying like, oh my God, like you have no idea, this helps so much, like blah, blah, blah. Like you're in my head, like you're talking about what I'm thinking. And I believe that maybe we're in a period of time right now where the earth, the planet, reality desperately needs people to be activated to unleash and unfurl and open themselves and, you know, excavate their souls for all of us to explore, you know?
Totally. And I have to echo what you're saying. That absolutely is my favorite part of doing the podcast. Of course, there's the interviews themselves, but being active in the community. And I think that's how you and I met, actually, is just kind of this online podcasting community via Instagram. And I get so lit up when people tell me that something changed their perspective or changed their mind. We just did an episode last week on sacred sexuality, and it was so great for me because I have a lot of men on my podcast and I've been searching for women. So I finally got to, you know, interview a friend of mine who came down to Soltara to do some medicine work. Her name's Sarah Riegelhuth. And we ended up talking about sacred sexuality. We talk a little bit about tantra. We talk about period sex and all of these things. And I just had a flood of men message me after being like, hey, thank you. I feel like I've never been allowed to hear a woman talk about period sex before, or what that really feels like, or what she really wants. And they said like, you're making me look at my relationship with my partner, with my daughters, how I'm raising them, all of this. And thank you for helping me observe my own toxic masculinity, which is funny because I never used that term or projected that term in the podcast, but it's fascinating to see how people kind of connect to themselves in the words that they hear.
Yeah. Well, toxic masculinity, women can have it too. Yeah.
Word.
Yeah. I mean, I think it just represents sort of an idea, I think, it's a embodied ethos or ideology, toxic ideology, really, the ideology of, domination and control and, shutting down and masking and, a lot of these kinds of things, aggressiveness. It really, I think it's really helpful. It's really useful to open up that dialogue. And, there's a lot, there's a lot of, I really truly believe in the kind of the state of the world in which we find ourselves in today has a lot to do with the fact that we have severed our connection with the natural world, with the feminine, with the mystical, with the unknown, with the mystery, right? A lot of that has to do with the lack of ritual and the lack of ceremony that a lot of indigenous communities know and cherish. Their particular kinds of mythology and their forms of worship and what they consider to be sacred. Right. But also this idea that there's no initiation rites really anymore. So we have a lot of men, so Joseph Campbell talks about this in terms of saying that like women sort of have an initiation because they go through something that happens to their body. As you just brought up, like you get your period. That's sort of something that is almost like, it is like a psychedelic experience in a way, because it's like you cannot run away from it. It is undeniable. And there is a literal change happening. Whereas men don't necessarily have anything like that. So we're not confronted with this real sort of change, this real tangible, palatable change. Whereas in a lot of indigenous societies, and Campbell talks about like the Upanishads and a bunch of other, groups of people that would like kidnap little boys in the middle of the night, and like everybody's kind of in on it, and they like take them to the forest and they wear these masks to scare them, and it's this ceremony of becoming a man to like to be worthy enough to step into a realm of achieving more wisdom, to hold and carry the values, the morals, and the ethos of the tribe, And now we just see that like, where is that? Like, where does that exist? Like, you turn 21, you can drink a beer. Like, that's our,
Yeah. Yeah. What you are talking about right now really hits home for me. And in fact, it's the reason that I started my company a few years ago, which I don't even know if you knew that I did this.
What's your company's name?
I'm the CEO of a company called Lunar Wild.
Lunar Wild? What does Lunar Wild do?
Lunar Wild is a sacred rite of passage gift for young women when they first start menstruating. It was based on,
Wonderful.
It's so funny.
See, this is why I don't do research, because I like to be surprised.
Yeah, no, me too. So it was an idea that came to me after I went on a 10-day vision quest in the desert in 2017, just kind of fasting solo and being with myself at a little bit of a quarter life crisis, and came out so infatuated with the idea of sacred rites of passage as rituals, as initiations, and looked around at Western culture and I said, where is this? Like, where is this? Especially for young women, as you were just saying, it's physiologically inevitable. And studying psychology as I have, I know that this event is incredibly poignant in a young woman's life. And any man or woman, person listening to this could ask women in their lives, hey, do you remember the story of your first period? And I would bet like 99% of women remember exactly where they were, who they were with, maybe even what they were wearing, you know, if they had information about that event, or if it just, like you said, came out of the blue like a psychedelic experience and hit them. So given that this event happens once in a woman's lifetime for that first time, why, if we know how much psychological power it has to last to the day she dies, why are we not choosing in that one moment to make it a positive one? Why are we not initiating her into the gift of womanhood, into feeling like she's part of a sacred blood sisterhood? She's part of creation. Every person on the planet has a woman's body to thank for being here. Why are we still denigrating menstrual blood? I don't know. So this was the idea, behind Lunar Wild. And I agree, it also needs to be present in some way for young men. I don't know, maybe someday we'll launch a ritual box that's really cool for young men as a sacred rite of passage gift. But yeah, so that's the story behind the foundation of Lunar Wild.
Wow. So cool. That's awesome that you're doing that. And so what do you do with Lunar Wild? Like, do you explain a little bit more about what you...
Yeah, so it's this box that I've curated. It's like a giant treasure chest full of amazing gift items from all women-run companies. It's all eco-sourced, organic, sustainable businesses, small businesses that we support. And I basically wanted to give each girl a better first period experience with everything that she needs for that moment. So we have, of course, all of the things that she would need for period management in like a very cool way, not just like your typical pads and tampons, but we have so many new technologies coming out now, especially ones that are more sustainable for the earth, like menstrual cups, or, we've got period underwear, washable pads, and all of this stuff. So I really wanted it to be this thing where she could have the agency to figure out what is best for her body. I mean, we don't generally give young women, girls, permission to say what feels good for them and what doesn't. We just tell them what to do and what to feel. And for me, this is the crux of the issue, because as a woman, if I cannot speak up about what feels good or does not feel good for me, how can I expect myself to be able to connect intimately with a man if I cannot feel like I can express that to myself or to others? How can I teach him what feels great for me later on in life? So it really starts there for me. It's about education. And then the other things in the box are just like a beautiful assortment of self-care goods. We have bath salts, we have chocolate, we have a candle, we have a tea that's made with medicinal herbs for balancing hormones, and a little beautiful bracelet with mantra cards. So it's this whole ritual experience.
Right. That's awesome. Do you think that, or would you like to see, or maybe you have ideas about adding more to that ritual experience? Like, do you think that it could be like sort of a ceremonial experience, or do you hear people doing things like that, like making it, I guess it's all up to like the mother maybe, or like the women in the life, like I imagine. And I know nothing, so I'm just going off the top of my head here. But I'm imagining that it could be a very like profound healing sort of moment to like usher in a new era, to have like a circle or some kind of thing that occurs in a ceremonial way, and just talking about it also in an open way, and honoring it as sacred.
Absolutely, and even to back up a little further. After my Vision Quest experience, I went back to my apartment in Brooklyn, and I'd left my job. I was just in this place of, by the way, my old job back in 2017 was a nanny for celebrities. So
wow.
I've had and then before that I was an elementary school teacher. So I've had like all these little different pockets in my life, but I was there at a crossroads going, what am I going to do now? Who am I? Like, who actually am I and why am I here? And I have this suitcase full of diaries that I've been keeping. I've been keeping diaries since I was 1997, so 7 years old. And I have stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of journals. And so after this vision quest, I was like, all right, I have no idea who I am. Let me study myself. And I got out these diaries and I flicked through and I began reading and reading and reading about my first kiss and the first time I had sex and the first time I did this and when that traumatic thing happened and when that beautiful thing happened, and just getting this fleshed out sense of myself. And then I came to this journal entry where I started my first period. And I described how my mother told me that she had been waiting my whole life for this moment, and that when she found out she was pregnant with a girl, she had been fantasizing this moment in her head, and she couldn't wait to welcome me to womanhood. And she told me all these wild and wonderful tales about indigenous culture, Aboriginal culture, the red tent, the moon lodge, and the idea of the moon lodge being this sacred space for women to go be in meditation, to be in prayer, to be with each other, to commune with spirit. And it was seen as the time where women were most psychically potent, or that veil was the most permeable for them to travel back and forth. And then they would be in that space, and they would bring back their medicine and integrate it after their moon time into the community. And this was the type of thing that informed the laws, the decisions, or maybe if it was a nomadic group when they were going to move. So this was an incredibly sacred time. So, of course, I was just listening to my mom with my eyes as big as saucers, and she told me about women's bodies being linked to the earth cycles, to the moon. Like, how cool is that? And that women in history, before we started getting all these artificial lighting and Wi-Fi and like all of these things that kind of throw off our hormone cycles, all the foods that we eat as well. Before all of that, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, women would generally menstruate on the new moon, and they would ovulate around the full moon. And, a large portion of the population was synced up as such. And that there's no mistake about, like, that's not a coincidence that our bodies follow this moon cycle. And also the idea that human beings, women, getting their period is really one of the only times that any creature on the face of the planet, period, end of story, pun intended, bleeds without something being severely wrong. Now, what we know about evolution is that when traits are not really necessary, they over time get bred out. Yet women still have periods. So there must be some important reason, because look at all the other mammals and look at all the other things that have babies that don't bleed, right? Some things do, like dogs, but for me, I think there's more to it than that. I think women experience such unnecessary catharsis when they receive their period. And I know it's a running joke, the PMS thing with men, and I'm not like trying to paint everyone with a brush, but that idea of like, oh, she must be on her period. And what I would love to see is more men really understanding the delicious gift that is a woman in her creativity, in her moon time, how powerful that is, how grounding that is. And if you respect your lover's moon time and you come to her, you ask her if she needs space, you ask her if you can give her a foot rub, if you can draw her a bath, if you can make her a cup of tea, I promise you the gifts that will come back to you if you're just doing that out of a place of genuine giving you will be amazed how much power, how much intimacy comes back to you if you honor that time.
Yeah.
End rant.
It was a good one. Yeah, there and you know, it just I have a tendency to kind of always think of the larger kind of historical civilizational framing of things. And I'm thinking of just like how, you know, we're talking about like toxic masculinity or whatever, like the patriarchy, like these kinds of things, these ideas. And you look at sort of the way in which civilization has evolved into the present moment in which we currently find ourselves right now. And you brought up Wi-Fi and electricity. And last night I was on this live podcast thing and we were talking about 5G and, you know, the radiation. I've been reading about electromagnetic frequencies. And so but it almost seems like this sort of like this masculine idea of conquering and controlling has also bled, pun intended, I guess, into this control of women, of women and women's bodies, and how, you know, what is acceptable and not acceptable, and what's tolerated and not tolerated, and and the entire, but the unfolding of that comes, there's so much power, you know, it makes me really sad whenever I hear that women can't like fully express themselves or they can't speak up. And because I look at you know, like it just, you have so much power, you know, I mean, we both complement each other. I mean, obviously that's why we're here, but the total amount of power for the totality of the human species is only like a fraction of what it's capable of, because we've limited so much of it. I mean, and you know, it's like just look around the world at all the laws and the rules and the like all these things that are imposed upon women and men to a degree, but more so women. The controlling of a woman's body and the shaming of it, and what comes of that. It's all just terrible things that manifest out of that. And then you get this pressure because there's this repression and this oppression. And then, you know, I was talking about how women can also embody toxic masculinity too, because it's a way to say, well, we're being pushed down. No, we're going to have exactly what men have. We want to have, and that I believe is like, maybe not what you want as well. You want to be a fully empowered woman in all of its, in all of her essence, right? And that's what I would like too. And I think a lot of men would like that. It's not that we want to be the same. We want to be individuals in our own power and our own integrity. And man, what kind of magic can come of that? Like what you were describing to me, your mom, first of all, sounds awesome. Like, wow, what a cool experience to have that. When I started going through my changes at puberty, nobody told me anything. Like I had pornography that I would like steal from a store, like a magazine or something, or like on the internet. And I had no one in my life that was like, oh, this is what's going on. And this is what, you know, none of that stuff. And I, you know, grew up with a very kind of like toxic view of like what sex and relationships were, you know, it's just didn't know. But what you're describing to me and your mom and the moon lodges and all this kind of stuff, it reminded me of this just beautiful vision of the world where we could all live like kings and queens in these empowered tribal communities that are like whole and healing and together and engaged in a participatory action of the unfolding mystery of life, you know?
And I think, you know, with current events, that's what we're seeing, that a lot of us are being kind of forced into now, to evaluate how we've been spending our time. I know that so many people have had difficulty adjusting to this space that they've been given, because we are in such a mode of action. We are in that masculine energy. And I'm using the term masculine because we're talking about like the yin yang here, not necessarily that you're a man or a woman, but you know, even myself adjusting to the extra time was just like, I was trying to manically fill it with things that didn't matter just because I was anxious. But then, once you identify that, you can kind of come back to yourself. But I know a lot of people are really struggling with that right now. And I like what you were saying before about the women and the men, and women being like, well, we want to have what men have. And it's kind of actually coming across in this aggressive way. And this is another reason that I started Lunar Wild, because I believe if we are going to bring the masculine and feminine energies of the planet back into balance, we need to bring the feminine forward in a feminine way. You can't bring the feminine forward in a masculine way. So, I used to get invited to like a lot of kind of like angry feminist rallies and sort of things like that, and be like, I found they were very centric on what they wanted to tear down instead of what they wanted to build up, like not my president or this and that. And it was like, okay, but I believe in the law of attraction. So if I'm thinking all the time about how much I hate things and how much I don't want that and how much life is unfair, I'm not actually creating anything. I'm not in my feminine, I'm not in my creatrix, and I'm not in my power. So for me, I said, what can I create that imbues the world with more of this beautiful, sensual, receiving, femininity, gifting power that I so desire to see? And that's what I did.
Yeah, and it's because I feel like I can relate to that on like the male side of things too, but the like early on in my kind of inquiry into philosophy and getting curious about psychology and different things, like I found myself in very like libertarian kind of anarcho-capitalist camps of like, this is an atheist. Like I was like an atheist anarchist, like probably the worst person to talk to at a party. and
then what? Psychedelics?
Yeah, then psychedelics happened. But it was like the certainty, the amount of certainty, the amount of fever, the fever pitch of that certainty. But it like what you had suggested was like, if you really want to change things, right? And I would say that I would argue that maybe a lot of people don't really want to change things. Maybe they just want to participate in the drama because it gives a sense of meaning and purpose. You're fighting against this thing. We have a target. We have an enemy. We're the heroes. We're morally superior.
Yeah.
And
identified with the suffering. United in it.
United in the suffering. Yeah. And that's a particular kind of game that's available to play, and people. Who's to say that? I don't know. That's not me. That's not for me. It sounds like that's not for you either. So it's like
no, but it used to be
right.
I get it.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, that's good that you experienced that, because now you're on the other. You've come out on the other side here, and you're continuing to move up, and for not that it's like a hierarchy, but we're continuing to move through lots of experiences, and I think that really helps, especially. Having a voice, owning a company and having a podcast, you're able to really speak from experience. Mm-hmm. You really have seen and experienced what, these things are, which a lot of people are going through. And understandably too, because the world is chaotic and we want to make sense of it. And we want a story. We want a story that makes sense of our position in it,
Totally. And going back to that idea of the game, one of the games that's available is like, I think that I used to feel very powerful when I could manipulate. And maybe it wasn't conscious. So I'll give myself that. It's not like I was a terrible person consciously aware that I was trying to do harm. It was that I think in a lot of ways, I didn't understand how to find power within myself. And I felt like I was a little paper boat being tossed around in the ocean of how the world was interfacing with me as a young woman, and having all of this sexuality projected at me and feeling like, okay, I don't want that. I'm not asking for that from these people, from these strangers. What can I do now to feel like I'm in control still? Because this is like horrible. People are just yelling at me when I'm walking down the street, or backing their cars up and following me down blocks, or sending me DMs about really vulgar things they want to do to my body and I don't even know them. So I used to mess around with people, and I used to kind of throw it back at them or say something that would just intellectually drive them into the ground, because I was like, well, they don't think I'm smart. Well, let me show them, and I'll just make them feel absolutely stupid. And I could. And for a while, I think I got off on that because it was the only way that I knew how. And now, after a lot of personal work, a lot of healing, and a respectable amount of plant medicine, I realize that I feel the most powerful when I do surrender. And that, especially with my nature as woman, I feel the most connected to source when I surrender. And because the beginning of life was harsh, I put on a really strong masculine mask where I just had to protect myself and take care of myself and organize and be that CEO. But my most recent relationship told me so much about the pure bliss of when you can, like, fully, in the most juicy way, just surrender to someone more deeply than you ever have before. Like, to look someone in the eye and be like, I'm terrified, here, still have my control. It is the most heart exploding, alive feeling that one can ever feel.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know when I came around to this way of thinking, but I remember thinking, because I'm like on the same path as you, you know, or have traveled the same path as you, where I would really get excited about like Twitter beefs. Like I would really get excited about like, I'm going to smack this person down. I'm going to slam this person. I'm going to show them that I know what's up,
right?
You know? And and the hate and the vitriol and the DMs that you would get and like the vulgarness, like that sort of thing, you know, there was a point where I was starting to think of those things as just like, oh, okay, wow. You know, like what is this person going through, you know, or what is this person feeling, or what is this person's life experience that's causing them to behave in this way? And I had this like moment of like thinking about, like, at the time, I think it was like ISIS was like a big problem. And I just remember being like, yeah, I feel really bad for them. You know, I feel really bad that because to have that experience, you know, the mainstream kind of story, the narrative is like American United States, like we're the good guys, we're the heroes, we're going to go over, we're going to defeat the villains, you know, and that logic applies to everything. We even see it right now with coronavirus. We're going to fight the virus. We're going to conquer the virus. We're going to win, you know, very masculine, you know, energy as well. But this idea of being like, wow, I really am looking into what it must be like to live in that experience, to live in the experience of hate, to live in the experience of being like a catcaller, or being like, you know, somebody that is aggressive and who, you know, violates other people's space and things like that. That there's got to be something off there, that person's got to be suffering. That person needs love, needs compassion, needs to be taught, needs to be educated, and probably doesn't need to be smacked down by me, you know, because what is that going to... So I started like approaching it. At first I started being sarcastic. Like if someone left like a comment on a YouTube video or something, like, oh, this guy really knows what he's talking about, or like, you know, blah, 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 whatever. I'd be like, oh, hey, thanks for the positive criticism. Like, thanks for the critique. I really appreciate you adding value to this conversation, you know? But yeah, it is, I don't know. How does one learn that? Like what, you know, like how is that's just something because I can't even remember how it emerged for me.
Yeah, actually, it's funny thinking about this. I don't know why, but I feel like I've quoted this maybe 4 or 5 times in the last week in various contexts. But I'm actually thinking of something that Jesus said, which was forgive them, for they know not what they do. It's like, whoa, man, to be like on your deathbed and just be like, hey, they don't get what they're doing. They're not there yet. Like their consciousness isn't up to par. And this is another thing about plant medicine is like, I feel like when you experience a certain depth of plant medicine, then you come back to the sacred texts, be it the Bible, be it the Upanishads, be it, whatever you're reading, it's like it has new meaning. And you're like, oh, it's all the same stuff that they've been saying for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And like, I get it, man.
Yeah.
But when it comes to what you're saying, like, how do we cultivate that compassion? It is about dissolving that idea of that we're separate from others. And I think that definitely comes from having some sort of mindfulness or meditative or awareness sort of practice. For me, that was my initiation into that, was just listening to the Tara Brach podcast.
Oh yeah, she's great.
I knew nothing about like anything. Like I didn't meditate. I didn't really even do yoga. I think I was just in the middle of yet another heartbreak, and I felt so gutted, and a friend had sent me that, and I just like listened to her for 8 hours straight. And I think I had like my first awakening, and I was like, oh my God, this pain is like, it's not outside of me. It's not on that person. Like it's all originating within me. And this person is my teacher, and I get to thank them, because something that bothers me a lot might not bother somebody else at all. Something that bothers me a lot could be nothing for somebody else. Yeah, I mean, I was even talking to someone the other day that said that, this whole virus thing, their parents went to the grocery store and brought home like a ton of veggies for them. And I was like, hey, we got you these veggies. We thought you would like love this because we saw you were getting sort of low. And this person was actually mad at their parents. They were just like, I didn't ask you to do that. You didn't ask me if I needed more, and I don't want to waste stuff. I'm never going to go through all of this. And it's like, for me, that wouldn't really bother me. If someone brought me home a ton of veggies, I'd be like, yeah, man, I'm going to juice this. I'm going to make a soup out of it. Like, that was so thoughtful of you. Thanks for thinking of me. But to this particular person and what their woundings were and are, that was triggering.
Yeah.
So to just recognize that it's not the event, man.
Right.
It's how we're perceiving it.
Totally, 100%. And I think that it's this little mini like call to adventure, like hero's journey sort of, invitation that comes up, every moment where you're presented with a choice in how to respond. Are you gonna deny what's in front of you? Are you gonna reject what's in front of you? Are you gonna act out with hostility? And are you going to unconsciously project something? We have it's a million choose your own adventure novels that you can write that are right in front of you.
How do you know when you've do you get a sense of like a pass fail, like, oh man, I just failed that spiritual test, or like, okay, yeah, I'm really proud of the way that I handled that situation? Like, is there a barometer for you of that, and what does that look like?
I feel like I tend to know immediately. I feel like I tend to know, like, even if I'm saying something, sometimes I could respond in a way that I don't really want to respond, or I'm being reactive, and I'm like, oh, I'm doing it and it's happening and I can't stop it. And I'm like, but I want to, I should, but I'm not. It's coming out,
Yeah.
And at least I have that awareness, Right. Whereas in the past, like I sort of look at my life, in terms of like I feel like I was sort of unconscious, especially when I was like a teenager, when I was in high school. I was very like angry and, rebellious and stuff and aggressive. and it was just all reaction. But I think that the barometer, I think, is that when I don't feel the need to immediately jump into something, if someone says something, if I feel triggered, if there's, to immediately react. I think that more times than not, I've noticed that it's really about, back to what we were talking about before, the breath is not even, actually taking a breath, but like what the breath represents, which is space, air, room, expansion, rather than tightness, rigidity, contraction, So oftentimes when I feel that I'm doing well or that I'm doing good in situations and relationships is when I feel that space exists. When I feel like I'm in that open room with that Dr. Seuss color painting coming out at me, like when I'm tapped into that. And when I'm not, then I at least have the awareness now to know that I'm not, and I could catch myself. But I could feel the difference. Totally. What about you?
Yeah, I think for one, paying very close attention to how I feel. Because I know that even if I'm ashamed or embarrassed or maybe I'm at fault, but I say that and I say, hey, I failed to understand you, or I'm apologize for that. I still get that ballooning lightness in my heart. It's like, I don't know how they're going to react. They may not react well, but I know at least I've done my piece to act in the highest good that I possibly can in this situation. And so I'll feel that kind of golden firework in my heart, just like a sense of lightness, of rightness, of goodness. And then when you say something shitty, like you said, I actually physically experience it as like a shrinking or a blocking or a density in my energetic field. And it's like, ew, I don't want to feel that. And that's all the more motivating for me to speak the truth and to be a good person. And I always think, like, why did I come here? I came here to learn, and I'm saying here like planet Earth. I came here to learn and to have the human experience and to feel alive. Now, I can numb out from all the pain. Lots of people live their lives that way. But the most alive I feel, as I said before, is when I am surrendering, or when I'm facing the pain, or whether I am staring my dragons down right in the face. There's a certain level of like magical adrenaline that happens when you're like, fuck, I don't know the outcome of this, but like I'm here and I'm alive and I'm experiencing it. So you can go around your whole life masking and protecting and asleep. Or you can stare at it all in the face and show up to receive the reflections that are all around you.
Totally. And I feel like it's all about like what video game character do you want to be and what kind of game do you want to play? Do you want to be the victim? Because that's available. You can do it. You can be that. And we all, and it's not like this static thing either. I think for me, it's also like it comes in and out too. Like I'm not consistently not the victim. I'm not consistently this one thing. I'll fall into, oh shit, like I'll embody like this, oh, I'm the victim, mentality for like a little while. And then I'll come out of it and I'll go, oh wait, that was silly. Like, why did I think that? And I think that has value too. Like I tend to get a little depressed here and there sometimes. And I feel like if I go, there's this sort of, we want the cure for all these things, but I really do think that they're important messages to listen to, and like in our bodies and what's going on in our environments, and tuning into that, going to everybody wants to have psychedelic experiences and go talk to God and see the fireworks and the rainbows and everything. But there's also value in the darkness as well. There's, creation, destruction go hand in hand. And as far as I'm concerned,
And I love this because this circles right back around to what we were saying before and when we were talking about women and cycles.
yeah.
There's a natural duality to this life. There is so much beauty in the contrast. There's the dark side of the moon and the light side of the moon. And we need to embrace them both to find our true wholeness. And I think especially for women, maybe we get an unfair advantage to like dancing with emotional upswings because it's like happening, upswings and downswings because it's happening for us every single month. But we become very, very comfortable dancing with our shadows because we have to. It's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's just a value in it. There's a value in, also maybe a gratitude that can come of it too. When it's been raining and cloudy for a week and then all of a sudden the sun's out and shining and the trees are green, it's like, wow, like there's an appreciation that comes with that too more. And in conversation with people, like what you were saying before about, the feeling that you have. And I believe that you said, what I got from what you were saying and what I thought about was like naming it, like calling it by its name and putting the language to the feeling, right? And like, even if that's uncomfortable, which it kind of is because we're not really trained in that way. And a lot of people are trained to be obedient and follow the rules of polite society. And, if somebody is saying something to you, don't call them out on it or something like that. Or we have a tendency to go in the opposite direction and get really aggressive and really start calling them names and hate, like all that kind of stuff. But actually just kind of taking a pause and just saying something like, hey, I just want to let you know what you're saying right now is actually making me a little uncomfortable, or, I'm feeling a little, like this way or that way. And putting a name to it, I think it really helps too. And like that also creates some space and it invites a truth that one person is experiencing that could potentially be a shared communion between two people that can open up to a whole nother world. Like you were talking about before, what you had with your ex, like you communicated.
I was just thinking about that.
You communicated like you were like this. I'm calling it by its name. I'm putting the language out there. I'm saying what I feel and think, and look what happened.
Yeah, it's that showing your belly first thing.
Yeah.
Definitely. And the more we can call ourselves out, I think it gives permission for others to do the same, because there's a fine line. Like you can say, oh, well, this conversation is making me feel this way. I mean, for me or anybody really, that still could be triggering because it could feel like blame. So what I might say instead is, I'm experiencing feelings of jealousy, and I'm also really insecure that expressing these feelings of jealousy is going to make me look a certain way to you. And that feels really yucky, and I'm embarrassed to even be saying it. Like, who doesn't respond with love and compassion to that? It's like, oh, yeah, damn, I feel you, man. I've been there.
I love that. Yeah.
It
reminds me of Robert Anton Wilson, one of my favorite thinkers, authors, said there's a big problem with the word is. Mm-hmm. Like he says he tries not to use it anymore, or he said he tries not to use it anymore. He tries to say, it seems to me, or it appears to me. And that just like, that changes everything. Cause like labeling, like saying like, you're being. Yeah.
Starting anything with you. Don't do that, folks.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, it seems to me that there's a little tension here right now. It seems to me that I'm experiencing a little bit
or the difference between you're not making sense and I'm failing to understand fully as deeply as I desire. Can you explain this to me in another way?
Yeah. Have you ever read the book Nonviolent Communication?
Yeah, that's what Marshall Rosenberg. I have learned everything I know about communication from that man.
Yeah.
I listen to his audiobook like once every few months, and I'm so sad that he's not around anymore, but I sometimes just like fantasize that he's my grandfather, because he's like, his voice and his stories are just like so wonderful.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend that book to anyone who wants to improve any of their relationships.
Definitely.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much can be changed in the way that we language our reality. Like as Terence McKenna would say, like if you understand the nature of language in reality, then you understand how to manipulate reality. And a lot of people I don't know who was the originator of saying spelling is casting spells, but it's
right.
like, that same thing. Thoughts become things. Like we live in this symbolic world, and just changing the way that, just tilting the telescope a degree to this way changes the whole dynamics of things.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you journal too. I mean, I know did you just interview Eric Godsey?
I've had him on the show. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. He's a really good friend of mine, and we always talk about journaling, and it's like,
yeah, he's like a journal master. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, so am I. I've been doing it since 1997.
That's right. Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, well, you just told me. Yeah, you have been since you were 7.
But like the words we choose and how we tell our story, that was another thing that ayahuasca really, really, really taught me. I actually had this suitcase full of journals come up in that first week of doing ayahuasca back in May of 2019, and it was like, what does this represent to you, and why are you holding on to these stories? And I remember this one day I was just so sick. Like I had this, like, it felt like a bowling ball of heavy density in my gut, and I was just nauseous and wrestling with it, and I couldn't let it go. And I kept saying, it's okay, Hallie, you can let this go. And it was like, no, I don't want to let this go. And I was like, what is this? Inviting it to just show me its face, or what was really going on here. And I realized it was attachment to my own suffering. And I've told this story before, I think on my podcast, but it was like, I was afraid to let go of the literal bag of painful stories that I had written about myself, the spells I had cast into the world, that I had written like decrees. Because if I let go of the stories, I didn't know who I was anymore. I wasn't in that victim role. And I had been that. I had been painting myself as the hero and also the victim, of what other people were doing to me my entire life. And I literally felt like I was going to die as I knew it if I let go of those stories. And the ugliest part of it was like, what's really underneath this, Hallie? I felt like my suffering was what made me special. And by special, I mean better than other people.
Yeah.
And what I realize now is that my suffering does make me special, in that it has deepened my capacity to understand, to empathize, to hold space for incredibly traumatic things for other people. But it's different. There's a different slant on it. Like you're saying, there's a different vibration and a different power around it.
Totally, yeah. And I love this author, Robert Bly. And he says, wherever our wounds are is where our genius lies. Like wherever your deepest, trauma, your wounds, the scariest place, like Campbell again, like the cave that you fear to enter is the treasure you seek. Like it's all right there, waiting for us just to tap into it if we have the courage to do so. And the thing is, it's we're fortunate, I think, to be able to do this work and to uncover these truths about ourselves, to investigate and discover who we truly are. And I think because of that fortune that we have to be able to go into these places and spaces, that it requires us to then share that gift too with others, and open that up, because, for whatever reason, we're the kind of people that have discovered this way. There's many people out there that don't, and I think that we live in a culture that doesn't promote that. We've sort of been when I mean culture, I mean like mass culture, pop culture, mass media culture, society, and that sort of thing. It's all about being dependent upon higher institutions and higher powers, and not being an empowered individual, and being dependent upon the singular monolithic narratives and stories that the culture's pooping out, whatever that is. So yeah, really learning to go into these spaces, and that it's not weakness, that it's actually strength, is a tremendous insight to discover. Yeah. And I encourage everyone to go into those spaces, those scary places that aren't so scary.
Totally. You nailed it. That's the biggest trick of all. It's like we think that by relaxing into it, we will melt into oblivion, or it will be our demise or whatever. And it's like, yes, but only for a moment.
Yeah.
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 It really is like you can choose between the discomfort of a moment of rapturous truth, or living with the pain of a lie that you're masking and hiding for a long time from yourself, maybe forever.
Yeah. Yeah, and I truly believe that the more people that awaken to the truth of their power and go into the darkness of their traumas and their stories and their victimhood and uncover that and unleash that, then the more that creates a ripple effect, just as it does the other way. The more that you live with the masks, the more masks that ripple out into the environment in which we live in, which makes it, I think, for me, it's like, I just want to see more of a healthier, more holistic world where we care for each other, depend on each other, and fall more in line with nature, and then that just creates, it's just a more enjoyable time. And as our mutual friend Eric Gotzi would say, just to also like live it up, have fun, and have a lot of orgasms and like laugh, like because that's
totally,
that's what it's about too. It's about really enjoying like the deep, rich, fulfilling fun of this life as well. It's not all about doing the heavy work.
No, it's not. And it's funny that you bring this up, because this is another small moment of wisdom in one of my plant medicine experiences with ayahuasca that I would love to share. Was like, I had to recently step up to face in fullness, I believe, what my life is unfolding as far as my work and how I'm meant to show up in the world, which was a pretty weighted realization in a lot of ways, because it felt like a lot of responsibility and it terrified me. And during that experience, I again witnessed sort of a movie trailer of all of the various mammoth events that I have overcome, risen from the ashes over and over and over again in my life, loved and lost, had people die, all of it. And I just watched it, and I just held it, and I watched it. And it was painful. It was painful to watch. It was like, I don't want to see this. And the message that I was being shown was, you chose this. You knew this would happen before you came. And I thought, that can't be. I pushed it away. I thought, no way. This, still after all this work, it was like, no way did I choose this all. How can you honestly tell me that I chose this all? Why on earth would anyone want to come to Earth if it's so painful? And then just as they had shown me the suffering, you know, they showed me whatever they is. They showed me why. And I got this second beautiful movie trailer of all the juiciest parts of life. It was almost like a tourist commercial for come visit planet Earth. And I saw the sparkling aerial views of the expansive oceans and rolling sand dunes and mountains. And I saw eating exotic foods with your hands and sharing a deep sexual experience with a lover and gardening and getting your hands in the dirt and holding babies and smelling flowers. And it was like smashed into this singularity. And I went, oh, that's why I came here. Yeah. Yep. Makes sense. I remember now.
Yeah. Wow. I like really felt that as you were describing that too. Yeah. Man, like, I just think that if there's anything that we should take back from the psychedelic experience, of course, love is a given, right? But also just the joy and the bliss of diversity and novelty. That we find ourselves in this world that wants to move more towards this kind of, you know, I call it like the pharmaceutical antidepressant kind of model of just stay in the middle. Things are all right. Just kind of go with the flow and just kind of go along with this one singular narrative of reality. You know, like this is the piece of paper where you're allowed. This is the diagram or whatever of allowable thought, expression, and opinion. This is what's allowed to experience. But you have a psychedelic experience that blasts wide open, and you understand the totality of and the magnitude and the gravity of the dark and the terrible and the destructive and the joyful and the blissed out and the exuberant and the unctuous and all this stuff. I mean, it's magical. And it's, I forget who was talking about this recently, but they were saying, I think it was Alan de Botton, who's a philosopher and runs a YouTube channel, The School of Life, says like, you know, I don't often cry I don't often cry when I'm in pain. I cry in joyful and beautiful moments because I'm so taken by them and I know that they're impermanent, you know? And it's like, what a gift to experience everything that you just laid out, you know? It's just like this, the mountains and the earth and the animals and the sex and the babies and just everything that the human experience can provide. And it's available to those who want to venture into that room. When you open the door to that room and you keep opening doors, like it doesn't just expand in one direction. It doesn't just expand in hedonic pleasure. It expands in the whole circumference of the territory expands. And it's like, you chose that. Like you said, deal me into this game, didn't you? Right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. What a wonderful world.
What a wonderful world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, cool. This has been such a great conversation. Our first conversation, and it just kind of flowed. I'm really happy with the way that it went. How about you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been my absolute pleasure for sure.
Awesome. Any like parting thoughts or final things that are present for you right now that you're thinking about, feeling?
Just feeling really grateful. Just feeling like I want to say this to everyone too. I posted about this on my Instagram the other day, the Thought Room Instagram, and it was just like there's been a lot of memes and things floating around like, how are you going to use this time and what are you going to do with it? Like how are you going to show up? Like don't be lazy, don't squander it away. And I posted about really trying to play again in this space of the feminine and I haven't been posting that much, and I've been going through my own little like dips into depression and just being like, ooh, this is fun. Okay, just riding this. And I want to give other people permission, if they're feeling at all like I am or I was, to just allow yourself to not have to create anything. You're not falling behind. You are not being lazy. Don't listen to people who are telling you that. I mean, they mean well, but you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And the most beautiful things come from a little period of fermentation. So whatever you put out, it's going to be ripe and rich and ready when it's ready. And you don't have to be anywhere than exactly where you are. You're worthy. And when it's the time, it's the time.
Perfect. So
yeah.
And plug your all your stuff, your Instagram and podcasts and everything.
Sweet. So people can find my personal Instagram. It's Hallie_Rosebud. So HALLIE_Rosebud. My podcast is called The Thought Room. It's available on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, anywhere you want to get your podcasts. And the Instagram for that is @ThoughtRoomPodcast. And then also, if people are interested in Lunar Wild, the website is lunarwild.com. We also have @LunarWild on Instagram. I can also maybe offer a coupon code for your listeners, which I can make one for you later. It can be Mycadelic, and give that to you to put in the show notes.
Cool.
And yeah, and if anyone's interested in plant medicine at Soltara Healing Center, because I spent so much time there as a part of their team, they can feel free to reach out to me about that. And I also have a discount code for Soltara, which is just Thought Room, and it's $200 off any plant medicine retreat at Soltara Healing Center.
Awesome. Thanks, Hallie. Yeah. And Soltara, I've yet to go, but I know a lot of people there who've been there, who say good things, including yourself, people that work there, good friends of mine from the temple who were there, and some healers, I think, that go and participate there. So I hope to get there soon, hopefully when this whole thing dies down and I can fly again. But thank you so much, Hallie. This was so great, and thanks for everything that you're doing to help improve. What does Jack Cornfield say? He says, touch the part of the garden that you can reach. So yeah, thank you for doing your part in the ecosystem of ideas and thoughts in this new kind of awakening movement that is occurring.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you for everything and having me today.
You got it. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. If you did, go and leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. You can leave a 5-star rating and a review if you feel like writing something. That would be great. It helps the show a lot, helps us bump us up in the Apple algorithm, get the podcast exposed to more people. So if you like the show, go ahead and do that. If you want to go a step further, go to patreon.com/MikeBrank. You can donate, become a patron, be a part of the Mycadelic Inner Sanctum WhatsApp chat group of people chatting and connecting all around the world, refining the others, bringing them together, creating community. One of my favorite things to offer. I also release bonus episodes. Sometimes I do episodes that are kind of raw and kind of beta test them for the producers of the show, which are my patrons, the people who support the show. Big shout out to everybody that's a patron. Thank you for your love and support. If you want to do a one-time donation, you go to my website, mikebrank.com, go to PayPal and do a one-time donation if you feel that. And I really like the method of donation. It's a gifting mentality, and reading Charles Eisenstein's books recently and his talks have really kind of made me embrace the spirit of the gift, of giving and gifting. And what better time than this holiday season to be generous and to give. And, you know, if you like the show, just tell people about it, spread it, share it. Also, contact me. Go to my email on my website, the contact page, mikebrank.com. Reach me on Instagram, Micadelic_podcast. Hit me up on Facebook. Send me your messages. Send me your thoughts. Send me guest suggestions, ideas. Share your story with me. Reach out. Give me feedback. What do you like? What don't you like? And I love to hear from people. I always respond. So you can go ahead and do that. If you're interested in CBD, we have Hemp Bombs as a sponsor. You can go to hempbombs.com, get all kinds of CBD stuff. And I used to take their gummies. I think I'm going to start taking them again. I ran out, so I got to get some more. But they're really good. And yeah, check it out. If you're interested in CBD, you want to give it a try, put in the code Mike15 at checkout and get 15% off all of your CBD wants, desires, needs, and so forth. Big shout out to Danny Barnett and Galaxia for the music, the intro and the outro. And of course, thanks to Muse, who I mash up their song and put the Terrence McKenna clips and everything in without their permission, but somehow I'm still able to do it. So thanks, because I love that. And what else? I don't know. Thank you so much to everybody for your love and support, for listening. And yeah, I really, really, from the bottom of my heart, really can't express how grateful I am that out of all the podcasts out there that you choose this one to listen to. And like I said, let's really make this a collaborative effort. If there's something that you hear, that you notice, something going on with the show that you're like, hey, you used to do this or you do that, or I'd like to see this, or hey, did you ever think about that? Shoot me a message. I'm open. I communicate. I message back. I like this to be a collaborative effort. I want more community involved in this. So anyway, thanks. And till next time, peace.